Hello and welcome to Talking Events, the industry podcast brought to you by Event Industry News. Before we kick off today's episode, let's say a few thanks. First of all, headbox.com have very kindly worked to secure the venue that we've set up the podcast studio in today. That venue is the Shangri-La Hotel at the Shard, London. I sit here recording the podcast in a private meeting room on level 34 with a beautiful backdrop of London behind me. If you're listening to the podcast via iTunes, it's well worth hopping over to eventindustrynews.co.uk and checking out the video of today's podcast as well. And you can see some pictures and footage of this fantastic setting that we've got for the studio. So on with today's episode, and we welcome to Talking Events for the first time Jamie Vaughan, Managing Director EMEA from Eventbase. Jamie, thanks for joining us on the line today.
That's great. Good to see you, James. I'm slightly jealous. I wish I was with you.
We'll try and get back here another time. This is a venue that we would no doubt like to secure for future occasions as well. So we'll get you into the studio. But yeah, we're going to talk today. Technology regularly crops up on the podcast as a topic of conversation.
Sure.
Let's first of all explain who Eventbase are. People who read Event Industry News will have come across the name, I've no doubt at all, because there's been lots of coverage of you guys in the last couple of years. But tell us a bit about Eventbase, what it is you guys do.
Yeah, sure, thanks. So I'm Jamie Vaughan, I'm the MD of EMEA. The fact we have a region, EMEA, suggests we are a global company, that we are. We're based out of the very beautiful Vancouver, Canadian business, about 7 years old now. Growing from strength to strength. We specialise in the development and deployment of mobile applications, but our genre is specifically within the event industry. So we do some pretty powerful apps that empower delegates and organisers to get the most out of their event.
And what sort of events would you find Eventbase at? Do you specialise in certain markets, in niche sectors of it, or are we talking about the events industry as in its broadest sense?
Yeah, broad, to be honest. We're completely cross-genre. So we have a bunch of clients in enterprise, music, film, obviously trade shows. I'm going to give you a slice of my life. In 2 weeks' time, I'm off to Las Vegas for my sins for Hewlett Packard, one of their biggest conferences, 20,000 people descend in Vegas. I fly back, I go to Cannes Lions, where we do the whole festival engagement, and then I come back to Farnborough Air Show. So completely cross-genre, and we do like to partake of the Cannes event. I think it's the best way that you can truly understand what's trying to be achieved. Ultimately, our definition of event is where a community comes together. You know, communities are there for the single interest, whether it be music, in that case aeroplanes or Hewlett Packard. They come together physically, and our definition of a good app is where we create a window for that community to experience the event in its best way.
How difficult is it for you to be able to deliver an effective event app solution? And the peripheral services that you also provide to such a broad range of events, because events are different beasts. Every single one, even events within the same sector, will be unique in their own right. How difficult is it to provide that sort of service to such a broad spectrum?
Sure, I get your point, and you're right, and you're also wrong. They are broadly different in how they deliver certain types and what the content may be. However, back to my point, they're all about communities coming together, right? So that community has a common interest. So the trick is to ensure that you're engaging the community on the right level. So, for example, we do a show called South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. Everyone knows we do that one. It's one of our famous shows. It's immense, right? It's also cross-genre. So South by is one of the most complex scenarios you can imagine. There are 6,000 sessions, 230 physical venues, right? Lord knows how many people go to it. So it's about engaging at the right level. So if you're interested in music, then a lot of the content is based on video content of your acts, about how you get to see them, how you get there. If it's film, we contain trailers. If it's the innovation part, then it's about networking. It's about getting the most out of that content. So we will align the content around the specifics of the event. However, we do many events. When you boil them all down, there are tremendous similarities between them all.
Absolutely. Event tech is a sector that's expanded rapidly, is very much ingrained within the industry itself now. Is there a way of defining event technology? And would you consider yourselves as a company to actually be working in event technology or just in the events industry? Do you see them as one and the same now, or is it still a separate sector?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually, and it's open to lots of debate because the term event tech is far too generic in my mind now. The tech that touches events now comes in a variety of shapes and sizes, and at all touch points, right from the point when you discover the events available on your website to the point you touch it through registration, right through to after the show when there's tech analysing behaviour and interaction with another. It also includes lighting, audio, visual. So it's so broad, all relevant, but very, very broad. I think that maybe someone should take the responsibility to re-categorise some of this into component parts. It is all tech because it's technology, but I think it can do a little bit of categorisation right now. We do see ourselves as a tech business for sure, but very much around the delegate engagement level.
When we to still use the phrase when we talk about event tech, but more specifically, I suppose, let's look at event apps in how they support delegates and the event organizer themselves. Are they?
Sure.
Have we reached the stage yet where they are a must-have item, or are they still a luxury I would like to have item?
Sure, that's again an interesting question because there are many types of apps out there. If we assume my last comment that the definition of tech that we're in is delegate-centric, then by definition the role that we play is massive, and I think it can't be ignored. I think that the tech it continues to find traction, but the world has changed. In the old days, it was very much about pushing content. It was about show guide on your phone.
Yeah.
It's not about that anymore, and it should not be about that anymore. We're talking about how people behave. You go to an event, people walking around with their heads down looking at their phone. They're doing something. Whatever that is, I don't know, but they're doing something. That's behavior, okay? So a true innovator, a true tech vendor will plug into that behavior. There's still space for disruption. At this moment in time, we need to join in to how people are behaving and give them things, either content or engagement, that's going to be compelling and improves their experience.
And improves their experience is perhaps a key phrase there, because what you want to do is enrich the experience that they have of going to the venue or going
Correct.
to the event. But you've got to be very careful, and I've always been particularly wary of event tech in the sense that we should never allow it to get to the point where it's actually taken over from the content of the very event itself.
Indeed.
How careful are you guys there when programming it and working with clients to ensure that what you're doing is enriching and not overtaking?
Yep, a great point. And by the way, I'm a massive advocate of face-to-face events. I like to talk. You might realise that already. I like to talk to people. I've been in events for many years, and I hope and pray that it'll never go away. I don't think it will. However, it can be improved. This is the point. The enrichment elements comes through innovation, our product roadmap, and what we think is appropriate. Now, don't get us wrong. We are not the only people responsible for where the product goes. Organisers have responsibility to demand things, to push certain things, not just to make money, to push it for a delegate and user experience. To give you some examples, we deployed a couple of apps earlier on, middle of last year, and one of our key innovations last year is what we loosely called our recommendation engine. What that means is if you go to an event that has a fairly multi-track or a fairly complex level of different types of content through sessions, it's quite hard for a user to navigate their own or to even know what to go and see.
Yeah.
We create a personal experience by having an algorithm in the app that will read the delegate's user profile and match make content based on that profile that is most appealing to that user. So instead of scrolling through 75 sessions working out whether I want to go and see Kim Kardashian talk about makeup or will.i.am about sunglasses, it will tell me, Jamie, you'll prefer to go and listen to will.i.am about drones or whatever based on my personal profile. So what happens thereafter is that the app becomes my advisor, my PA, okay? But that is based on commonality between my profile and the content of the show, not an organizer pushing what they think I'm going to like.
I'm curious to know how often or whether it's ever been flagged up with you by an event organizer. I know myself from going to events that if I go to a trade show, I may only see a very, very small part and a small percentage of that particular event and what's on offer. And I may walk away and in the days or the weeks afterwards find out that there was something relevant to me that I think, oh, well, I didn't really know that was there. Do you have you worked with event organisers who have come to you with that specific problem of saying, look, we're worried that a lot of people have left our event and that actually not really scratched the surface of what it's about, and how can you help me solve or address that issue?
Absolutely, yes. And there's a few things. There is, so going right back to our high-level message about community, if you are engaging with the community before the event apps are not just about the physical event experience, they're about the community. So they should start engaging before, during, and after. Okay, all the elements I'll talk about and have talked about today will be available in that time period. So you have the ability to lengthen the event. Okay, so if there are specific areas, then the organizer does have the ability to highlight certain things before the event's even happened. Okay, that also can be steered contextually to the type of user. So certain user groups or certain individuals can be pushed content the organizer feels is appropriate for them. All right, so we're beginning to change the way somebody may approach the event by having the ability to plan and manage their day before they get there. So through recommendations, we can do that. Secondly, you can relive the event. Okay, so we have this a few of our events where there's a lot of video captured and that's curated after the event. Yeah. We then keep the engagement within the app post-event, and we can keep the users engaged by publishing content, sometimes exclusively within the app itself, through video play, and big this year, 360-degree camera and VR in-app, okay? So you can go into the app and genuinely relive the experience even though it's finished.
I'm curious to know, just as an aside, the beauty about digital interaction is that you can track it, you can monitor it, and you can actually look at the statistics and how many people interacted with it. Now, when you look on your stats and your own experiences, what are some of the best examples of before, during, and after in terms of interaction? Because most people will get up in the morning, the first thing they do is reach out from whatever side of the bed they're on, get their phone, and they will instinctively go on to a couple of apps to check either Facebook or Twitter or the news or the weather or whatever that may be. Have you got examples of where there are some really great events out there that are using their apps well and people are using them months before and months after the event?
Yeah, I mean, we do track it, and we're asked to track these things. You know, I don't like the word tracking. Analysing better. Tracking is so much fine. So people like to analyse, and you can make judgments with intelligence. So as I mentioned, we have clients who look at the amount of times videos are watched to give them indication whether that certain session is going to be interesting. We have the ability for people to favourite sessions, which builds their personal itinerary in app. That gives organisers in advance a flavour, if you like, of capacity management. If it's a non-subscribable event, it may just give them an idea. But probably one of the most appropriate examples is we also happen to do a lot of film festivals, and we do the Sundance Film Festival, very famous film festival in North America.
Robert Redford, isn't it?
Robert Redford, absolutely. And we do that, done that for a few years. And when you go to film festivals, it's very difficult to get into a lot of the premieres. And they all go to the VIPs first and the stars, and then it's very difficult for laymen to go and get to see these things. And we wrote an e-wait list. So with our sister company, Intergalactic, we actually wrote an algorithm that users in-app would get up in the morning, they would see what films were being released, and they could subscribe to a waiting process to be allocated tickets. Okay, so I don't want to use the carrot and the stick analogy, whereas, you know, you get people using things for certain reasons, but that was an amazing carrot to get up and get on with your app content, because it would reward you with a very, very nice prize at the end of the day if you were lucky enough.
When we talk about then rewarding, I suppose that brings me on nicely to one of the things I wanted to ask you, which is the use of beacon technology and how it integrates with event apps. It's something that I first stumbled across maybe 3.5 years ago, when the term sort of iBeacons and beacons started to creep into the industry and into the tech world. Is it
Sure.
something that you guys are using now, and how does that, when we talk about carrot and stick, I know a lot of people have talked about the use of beacons as a means to help direct people around a particular event and offer them incentives and ways to actually engage on a higher level. How are you using it? What's your views on it?
Sure. Views are high. Eventbase, as a company, are massive advocates of beacon technology. We have been for the last 3 years. So probably back in the day when you started looking, we may be one of the people pushing it at that moment in time.
Yeah.
The last few South bys have had major beacon deployments. I'm talking about in excess of 1,000 beacons for one event. We have literally deployed, tens of thousands of units over events all over the globe. So if you want to know about beacons, speak to us. We're advocates. I'll say subject to popular belief, they're not just there to push messages, right? Like all technology, when people jump like, I can do this, and everyone's blasting people with messages based on where you're standing. That's true, and it's a good use, but they can be used for many things. The dynamic of the beacon is the beacon creates a zone. When you walk into that zone, it can activate something in app. That's it. The activation is only limited by imagination. It can be stamping where you are on a map. It can be used for networking. It can tell you if there's a bunch of people standing around you, who they are. It can send you messages, of course. It can send you messages based on dwell time, on contextual elements. So there are many, many, many use cases that we're building up where beacons are. I think beacons have a future in every event.
For anybody that's heard the term but may not be completely clear on how you access beacons and how you interact with them or how the beacons interact with you,
Sure.
would a visitor to an event physically have to have the app open and running on their mobile device in order to access any beacons that are relevant to that event, or will they automatically interact with a smartphone if Bluetooth is on?
So no, beacons are Bluetooth low energy, so it's a form of Bluetooth. You're right. They have to have the official app because, for example, beacons do not push messages. Mm-hmm. Okay, beacons unlock messages or activations that are programmed within the app. Okay, so it's a two-way interaction, but only for the official app and the beacon itself.
Right.
So they have to use it. It can wake the app up, but you need to have the app downloaded. So it is an extension to the app behaviour.
And again, I'm glad you clarified that because, again, I've spoken to people in the past who were worried that the use of the beacon technology would actually put off visitors who are walking around a trade show floor, for example, and the phone is just constantly buzzing because the messages are being pushed. Yeah. So we should clarify, this is not a case of pushing messages out. This is a case of unlocking information that's already built into an event's app.
Exactly right. And there are guidelines and people's concerns. Again, we're a technologist, we're a company that pushes new innovation, but we make money from our clients. Our clients are, all shapes and sizes, and they're good and they're bad. And I think, we all have a responsibility to make sure we don't abuse the situation because all features within most apps can be disabled, okay? And we go to enormous lengths and pains to create the carrots to use a beacon technology like mapping. You can internally map a destination, a venue that has no GPS signal and guide people on a map to where they're standing, which is amazingly powerful. But if you plague them with push messages, buy this, buy that, don't forget your free Coke or whatever, they're going to turn it off and they lose all that wealth of feature, which is a crying shame. So we all have a responsibility to use it carefully.
I was going to say, when I first came across beacons, that the use of it as a way to actually navigate around a gigantic show floor at a trade show, I thought was a brilliant, but a simple but brilliant way of using it. Because how many times have people been to a trade show looking for a stand and have just spent 15 minutes wandering up and down aisles backwards and forwards until they stumble across the one that they're looking for because they've looked at the printed show floor and they're actually 3 rows over from where they think they are. I think to use technology, sometimes I think we get carried away with using the modern event technology in its most detailed way, and actually some of its best examples and scenarios are when we use it in the most simple way.
Right. So we do some of the biggest trade shows in the world, a big venue like XL or NEC. I think the NEC is something like 2 million square foot or something. And a big show might have 3,500 booths. we have a feature that says "Find Me." You press the button and it tells you where you're standing. That alone is incredibly compelling.
How many, in terms of the venue itself, who's responsible for putting those beacons in? How many do you need in order to activate that level of service and that level of accuracy?
It fluctuates a little bit. I mean, it depends on the physicality of the building, it depends on the wall structures, it depends on, the height. So we have to do a calculation. But, if you look at something like the NEC, you can network all 20 halls with something like 800 beacons or something like that. It's a big installation. But it's compelling because it's not just for mapping. There are other advantages about wayfinding, directional, and all this and the other. You talk about venues. Venues they're not necessarily a hurdle because as a technologist we've learned to adapt. For example, we know that they bang on about Wi-Fi and 3G, and you don't really get it. So if you walk in the room, the whole thing dies. So we have to adapt. So we work our technology around the restrictions that we're going to accept. So we only write native apps. They all work offline. You can put them in airplane mode and they'll still be feature rich. There are component parts that might not work when you send messages to somebody or something like that. But the app itself and the content will still be there. So we work around these hurdles. Yet the biggest irony here is the venues hold the key because they can unlock tremendous potential to drive what's there and further innovation if there were some common technology. They're now beginning to get Wi-Fi. That they can put permanent beacon placements, Wi-Fi, they can Bluetooth placements from parking right through to the common areas, and it would be very easy to resell that. So I think there's an interesting few years ahead of us in those tech talks.
Would that help businesses like you if a venue, for example, said, look, we're actually going to invest and we're going to put 800 permanent beacons in our venue that can just be programmed by the app provider or the service provider that is being contracted by an event organizer?
Yeah, it would help all of us, not just me. It would help me sell my product, of course, but it would also help the venue because they can charge for it and get their money back. And it would help the organizer because they have compelling technology within their apps, and it helps the user because they're the ultimate beneficiary. Genuinely, there is no downside. And moreover, it would unlock different types of companies to use that placement that's already there. And I think it would drive innovation. You see, at the moment, we have a nightmare. So if I go to one of these big venues and I have to put 800 beacons in place, we have to configure everyone individually. We have to buy them, of course, configure them. We have to stamp them based on where we deploy them. They have to be stuck on the wall or put somewhere. For 3 days, we've got to collect them all. It's just ridiculous. There is a tremendous opportunity to do some joint work.
So potentially you do see a scenario where in the same way that they would invest in the electrical system or the in-house Wi-Fi and internet provider and that system, you would see a scenario where maybe in 5-10 years' time, venues have beacons just intrinsically as part of their infrastructure.
Yes. Although the timeline like 5 years, Lord only knows, because there's lots of other technology like 4G and 5G where you can do geofencing and positioning anyway. So I think it's coming. I think it's coming in one form or other. Beacons are good technology right now because they're very versatile, they're small, they're cheap, they're reliable, and you can deploy them pretty easy. So they are the choice right now.
Certainly something that I think we're going to touch on. We've mentioned in past episodes of the podcast very, very briefly, but I know that it's something that's on our radar and something that we're going to be looking at in a little bit more detail in future episodes. Moving things on, Jamie, and looking at the events themselves, I don't know if it's just me being misled or misreading things, but when I look at and I deal with the world of event technology, I seem to have this opinion that it's very much focused on the sort of the meetings and conference and trade show side of the events industry. When it comes to things like your outdoor music festivals and outdoor events, I get the impression that they're perhaps not looking at it as effectively as they could be or should be. Is there actually a viable way of deploying an event app in a field that's got 35,000 people in it? And are festivals using them effectively in greenfield situations?
100% yes. I suppose your perception may be either driven by the fact maybe that's more of your client base and or conferences, organisers, raisers, they're very commercial. It's all about the money, right? So that they can create the funds to put these certain things. If you look at music and maybe sports, there are some tremendous opportunities. So we've been fortunate to do the last 3 Olympic Games.
Right.
Okay? External events, engaging apps, true real-time leaderboards. We did London 2012, okay, and we had a GPS signaler within the torchbearer. So anywhere in the world, if you had the app, you could see where the torchbearer was at any moment in time.
Right.
Compelling, I don't know, but we could do it. We did it because we could. So there's tons of examples how we're trying to innovate in certain areas. We do a lot of pop festivals. I won't name any names, but many of these are in big open fields.
Right.
And, if you take an average demographic of a pop festival, some of the ones we've done last year in London, the average demographic was 18 to 24-year-old girls. Right. So they're very engaging. They very much use their apps. They're into their technology. So they want to know things like what acts are playing, what stage they're at, their own itinerary. But we've been working on technology using GPS and beacon to enable things like Find My Friend.
Yeah.
Okay. We can genuinely create a scenario now where you can be in a crowd of 80,000 people and it can tell you where your mates are. So there are some incredibly compelling features that are working their way through using this tech. The thing about pop and sport, sometimes they commercialise in a different way, so they don't have sometimes the budget to put into this ongoing technology because it's never been there before. So I think they're a bit slower in the adoption.
Is there anything interesting by comparison between the use of event apps at conferences, trade shows, etc., the corporate market, and outdoor festivals? Do you look at the statistics and think, oh, that's interesting, I wasn't quite expecting that? Is one or the other making more progress with the level of interaction that the apps are getting?
It's a tough call. I mean, obviously, you go to a pop festival, you've got fairly single sort of tracks. You get multiple stages, but it's all about going there and listening to music. What has been interesting is where there's been sponsor engagement. Mm-hmm. So things like beacons can engage people walking past certain areas. So one example was a big festival we were talking to, and they wanted to have their key sponsors, a makeup brand, offer certain makeup-related activities to people who are hanging around their stands. And that was through iBeacon push message. So, they are experimenting. Of course, one of the biggest areas, which we might come on to, I'm sure, when we look at the future of tech, but is merch and money. Having cashless elements to go and upgrade or buy merch or even food and drink and stuff is obviously overdue. There are elements around this with smart tickets and RFID and stuff, but apps are still being used as well. So a lot of this stuff will end up coming together, I feel.
Well, let's not dwell on it. How can event apps and your event apps, the ones that you guys design and supply, can they be integrated with the cashless payment systems that are now available not just at venues but in outdoor events as well?
Yeah, we're looking at it. So obviously with the launch of Apple Pay
a
few months back and some of the alternatives, it makes the whole app scenario become realistic, because only a year ago, unless you had the big companies buying into thorough merchant systems and the funding that was required, it was always a bit bitty, and you'd have to go to an m-commerce or an e-commerce site, and it was all based on signals and stuff. So it's becoming easier technically now. We don't have any real examples right now, to be fair, but our roadmap has it in there, and we have lots of clients talking to us about it. The obvious opportunities, for example, if you use a beacon, if you're queuing up, right, to get into a festival and you're a ticket holder, a beacon deployment in the area knows where you are. They know you haven't moved because it reads your dwell time. It knows who you are and can push upgrade notifications to you directly in your hand, which with the payment process, you swipe and pay and walk in the side door. You can jump queues. So there are some really compelling reasons as to why this needs to come forward. It's just early.
One thing I wanted to ask you, you can design them to be fabulous in terms of their content, have the beacons interacting with the app, etc., etc. If people are not downloading the actual app in the first place, then it's all pointless. To be blunt about it,
totally
is there still an issue that arises from people actually just not downloading the apps as much as you would like to see them downloaded? And what can organisers and event clients be doing to actually not ensure but promote the use of their app as something that is really viable and an intrinsic part of being at that event?
For sure. So you were talking about adoption. Adoption grows year on year anyway. I've been in the industry a little while now, and from figures as low as sort of 5-10% downloads, you're smashing big percentages on average now, and that's just by default, I think, because people expect them to be there. The biggest issue that I face isn't a technical thing. It's an expectation or an experience that they've had a bad experience. They have a low expectation of what the app will provide them, so a user doesn't feel compelled to go and download it, spend their time rummaging it. And this is where, podcasts like this and me and the team are out evangelizing every day of the week about the reasons why it's not what it used to be anymore. We need to continue doing this to swing it around, because some of the apps that we do are so compelling. We get users running and say, this has changed my experience. We would never do without this. And sometimes when features get dropped year on year, and organisers say, well, we did well that, we're going to move it this way, we get a bunch of emails saying, why have you taken that away? I relied on that last year, etc. So we get some tremendously positive feedback. We just need to continue making them compelling. But going back to the carrot and stick discussion we had earlier, I do have organisers come and say, we want to make it mandatory. Okay, and I say, okay, fine. What are you trying to achieve? We want to put the ticket in the app. Well, you can do that. It's a judgment that you have to make as an organizer, and a responsibility you have to your delegates. So, I believe we should put the carrots out and make them want to use the app, want to download it. And there are some tricks. Put the Wi-Fi code in the app, put the ticket in the app as well, so they can walk up to the desk. And then maybe, a Bluetooth-enabled access control unit where you walk straight through. There's tons and tons of more advantages to your experience if you engage through the app. But my common problem is a misconception that they're all a bit rubbish, because they have been, and some still are.
When it comes to we mentioned earlier about the design and the fact that people every day use apps as part of their daily activities and just their daily lifestyle, and they're used to these high-level apps that are really easy to use. How do you juggle creating something that's bespoke for each event in terms of its content, but also maintaining an interface that allows people to use it very, very easily? Because you don't want to make it so complicated that it becomes a nightmare for somebody to actually access and use. No,
absolutely right. So there are a few component parts that I agree. First of all, we have an infrastructure. So we have guidelines. So Google and iOS have guidelines on how an app should work, and a traditional navigation on the left-hand side, etc. So there are certain guidelines we have, but we have freedom to overlay that. So first of all, we have a bespoke UI and UX team. So for the non-technical listeners, UI being user interface, what it looks like, and UX being user experience, as in the journey. Okay, so we don't cookie cut our apps. Every app we build, we reconfigure. We do use component parts, but we reconfigure it bespoke to our clients. So it's completely branded, completely on point with what our clients are trying to achieve. We then look at the type of event, and we are very positive and sure to promote visuals. Okay, so we have an overlay screen called Discover, which is a tile effect screen visually representing all content. Now, this is I was going to say this is a fact. I've been told this is a fact, okay? So the brain recognizes a vision 60,000 times quicker than a narrative. That kind of makes sense, right? So if you look at any of the main apps like Facebook or LinkedIn or BBC, they've all got there's a load of pictures. That's what they are, okay? Because your brain recognizes it. Well, that's what we do. So we use heavy visual content to promote certain elements of the event. Yeah. Then, of course, you click on these tiles, and it takes you to synopsis of that session or that speaker or that article, whatever it may be. So we find that a highly visual approach works for us. And that's incredibly intuitive. You should just, as a non-user, load an app, and you should know how to use it.
But presumably you can only integrate those elements if the client has been not clever enough, but is also working with you to generate that content. Because if you're looking
Absolutely.
for pictures and relevant graphic data that can actually identify easily with a session or with a particular element of an event, it's got to be provided to you, hasn't it? So organisers have got to play their part.
Yeah, quite. But here's the thing, right? They spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks thinking about their website and about the content and how they're going to deliver and the logo and the colours, and they might want to think about the actual engagement that happens. So we work with our clients long in advance, and of course our ongoing clients get better and better. You know, there's definitely an evolution, and our repeat orders are usually much better than the first iteration. Even though the iterations at the first time were very, very good, they just get much better with time because the organisers themselves understands the reason we bang on about certain things.
We've flown through a load of topics today already, and time is tight. But I am keen, finally, to just talk about APIs, integration with other platforms, because this is something that is a huge demand is placed on this by event organisers, that within an event app, somebody could tweet what they're doing, or put on Facebook or put on LinkedIn what they're doing. How difficult is it with so many other platforms out there to actually integrate them into your own offerings, and what are the most common pitfalls that people make when trying to integrate other apps into their main event app?
Sure. So it isn't difficult. Okay, it's easy. Because I suppose it's easy for us because we do configure bespoke apps, right? So we build an app bespoke for an event. So in that construction process, we have the opportunity to look at component parts. Mm-hmm. It's rude and naive to assume that we do everything best. We don't. So we believe if we're to offer the best of breed solution, we need to partner with best of breed partners. So we have many, probably over 100 different APIs with global vendors, from everything from registration services, website content, polling solutions, voting solutions, mapping solutions, obviously social media aggregators. The list goes on and on. And this isn't our proprietary technology. This is API'd into us, and it's all about, as I think I mentioned the term earlier, my responsibility is to create a veneer, a window for the user to engage with an entire event experience. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be the only vendor who does that. And the last thing you want as an organizer is multiple apps. So we create the ability to plug pretty much anything through our veneer and offer the user an entire experience.
Jamie, it's been fascinating talking to you today. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have to wrap it up there because time is tight. But if you'd be so good as to come into the studio one day, let's get you on with one of our panel discussions as well. I'm sure this is we've touched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this particular subject, and there's an awful lot more that we could talk about. So let's get you in the studio one of these days and carry on with this conversation. You can subscribe to the podcast via iTunes. As I said, log on to eventindustrynews.co.uk as well to see the fabulous view of the location that we've got today. We're at the Shangri-La Hotel at the Shard, London, in one of their great meeting rooms on the 34th floor. Get onto Event Industry News, have a look at some of the other podcast episodes that we've done. But Jamie Vaughan, Managing Director, EMEA from Eventbase, thanks for joining us today.
No problem.
And you've been listening to Talking Events. My name's James Dixon. We'll see you next time.